Today we are going to talk about rhetorics. This is the art to persuade and motivate the audience as a speaker. First, we are going to talk about syllogisms. A syllogism is a kind of logical argument in which the conclusion is inferred from two or more premises of a specific form. There are three different kinds of syllogisms: categorical syllogisms, conditional syllogisms, and disjunctive syllogisms. First, we are going to discuss categorical syllogisms. Categorical is the most common syllogism. The basic of the categorical syllogism is if A is part of C, then B is part of C. A and B are both members of C. For example, all mammals are animals. This statement is not challenged and assumed to be true. All dogs are mammals. This statement is not challenged and assumed to be true. The conclusion is all dogs are animals. The conclusion is based on major and minor premise. The second one is conditional syllogism. Conditional syllogisms are also known as hypothetical syllogisms, because the arguments used here are not always valid. The basic of the syllogism type is if A is true, then B is true as well. However, the conclusion might not always be valid. Johnny eats cake every day. Johnny is placing himself at risk for diabetes. This is a valid example. Johnny does not eat cake every day. Johnny is not placing himself at risk for diabetes. This example is invalid. The conclusion is invalid because he might not eat cake every day, but he might eat fast food and drink soda, for example. Disjunctive syllogism. The basic form of disjunctive syllogism is either A is true or B is true. Thus, if A is true, B is false, and if B is true, A is false. A and B cannot both be true. In disjunctive syllogisms, the major premise is given in the form of choice between two alternatives, with the assumption that one out of two or more alternatives choices is right and that the rest are wrong. The minor premise either selects or rejects alternatives, thus leading to the conclusion. The conclusion may be spoken, although often it is not, as it is intended that the target of the major premise concludes this by his or herself. The meeting is either at school or at home. The meeting is not at home. The meeting is at school. Disjunctive syllogisms are often used by politicians. You choose for me or for him. This should mean you should not choose him because he will destroy the country. Therefore, you should choose me. Advertisers use them too. Flying is the safest way of travel. This means you can fly or go by car. There are more car accidents a year than fly accidents. Therefore, you should rather fly. Enthymeme. An enthymeme typically occurs as a conclusion coupled with a reason. It is a syllogism with either the major or minor premise missing. Often, the major premise and enthymeme might be referred to as an informal syllogism. Example: we cannot trust this man, for he has perjured himself in the past. The syllogism would be, those who perjure themselves cannot be trusted. This man has perjured himself in the past. This man cannot be trusted. Only the minor premise and the conclusion are stated. Ethos, or ethical appeal, means convincing by the character of the author. We tend to believe people whom we respect. One of the central problems of argumentation is to project an impression to the reader that you are someone worth listening to. In other words, making yourself as author into authority in the subject of the paper, as well as someone who is likable and worthy of respect. Pathos means persuading by appealing to the reader's emotions. Language choice affects the audience's emotional response. An emotional appeal can effectively be used to enhance the argument. Logos means persuading by the use of reasoning. Tropes and schemes. Tropes and schemes are both figures of speech that add color and interest to language. These are devices that contribute to the style of the author and can help to get the point across. One way to do this is by appealing to the emotion of the recipient. The main difference between a trope and a scheme is a trope changes the meaning of an expression and a scheme changes the order of the words. Often, a scheme will repeat a word or phrase several times for emphasis. This type of scheme is an anaphora. We are now going to talk about Obama's and Martin Luther King's speech to point out the rhetorical similarities. In Obama's 2012 victory speech, he did not need to worry about policies. It was all about emotion, pathos, connecting with the audience. He uses a lot of we and us language and fills the speech with examples of people he met, the so-called reference groups. Anaphora, the repetition of a word or phrase at the start of successive clauses or sentences. Usage of anaphora as a rhetorical device helps to convey and reinforce a certain message in a successive manner. If you listen to Obama's speech enough, he uses them generously.